All right, so in this video, we'll be looking at ear, or probably a better way to say it would be hearing. And so the sense of hearing has to do with detecting vibrations from the outside world. These vibrations are detected by mechanoreceptors in the organs of our ear, and those sensations are then sent to the brain. The brain perceives them as particular sounds. And so let's look at some of the structures of the ear. There are three sections of the ear: the external ear, the middle ear, and the internal ear, sometimes referred as the labyrinth, which I think is a much better name, but we'll probably say inner ear or internal ear. The external ear is made up of the auricle. Well, this is what we think of when we think of ear. This is sometimes called the pinna. It's a shell-shaped structure surrounding the ear canal, functions to funnel sound into that ear canal. The helix is this cartilaginous rim, just gives the ear structure. The lobule has no function at all other than just sitting there. All right, and then you have the external acoustic meatus, and that is a really big word for ear canal. And again, its purpose is to transmit sound waves to the eardrum. A couple other things about this ear canal: it's lined with hair and sebaceous glands, and actually something called ceruminous or ceruminous glands. And these ceruminous glands are what make earwax. And it's just protection for this particular organ, which is actually most of the ear organs are found inside the skull, which is pretty cool. So let's look at the tympanic membrane and the middle ear. The tympanic membrane is a fancy word for eardrum. This is the boundary between the external and middle ears. It's a thin, translucent connective tissue membrane, and it just acts just kind of like a drum. It receives vibration and it vibrates itself in response to sound and transfers that energy to those middle ear bones, which you see those three middle ear bones. Let's talk a little bit about the middle ear first. It is a small air-filled cavity, and it's found inside the temporal bone. And of course, it has the eardrum on one side, and then on this other side, you have this structure called the oval window, which is like a window into the inner ear. It's kind of the way I think of it. And you have this other tube here that leads actually to the throat. I grew up calling this the eustachian tube or eustachian canals, but now it has a new name, the pharyngotympanic tube. Pharyngo or pharynx is the throat, or where the nose and the throat meet, and the tympanic obviously is a tympanic membrane. If you have an ear infection, this is typically what's going on. This is inflamed. It closes this up, and it causes this area to fill, this middle ear to fill with fluid, which is painful because it is really small. And so a lot of times the way they deal with this is they put tubes in your ears, which they insert a little plastic tube into your eardrum to relieve that pressure until you can deal with these issues of constant ear infections. Just an interesting thing. I had tubes twice when I was young. All right. And so the pressure, what's interesting about this is pressure on both of these sides have to be equal for this tympanic membrane to actually work. And so it's kind of like if you filled a drum, take a snare drum and fill it with water, it will not work. All right. The pressure has to be equal on both sides of that drum to work. And so that's why this tube is so important. Sometimes if you've ever like flown in an airplane or something, you can feel that pressure building up and you like yawn or chew gum or something and it equalizes that pressure. We've all had that experience. All right, so let's move to the inner ear bones here. You have 3 of them, and there's the malleus first, or what's called the hammer, then the incus, or the anvil. Think hammer beats on the anvil, and then the way I remember this is hammer beats on the anvil to make a stirrup. Golly, I don't know if that helps you or not, but there's the malleus, incus, and the stapes, or the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, and they're 3 bones, and their whole jam is to take these vibrations that they have sensed on the tympanic membrane and to rattle a bunch and to pass them to the oval window where they will be, those same vibrations will be received by this internal ear. All right, and so here you can see the stapes and that. And so now we're going to get into the 2 major divisions then of the internal ear, which is sometimes known as the labyrinth. There is the bony labyrinth, and the bony labyrinth is these 2 structures here. You have, or the 3 structures here, you have the vestibule, which a vestibule is kind of like a waiting area in a building, so this is like the front area. You have the semicircular canals up here, and then you have the cochlea. All right, and the cochlea is filled with this is where you get into the membranous structure here. The membranous structure is filled with this fluid called endolymph, which I don't see endolymph on here anywhere. All right, and so let's look at these 3 structures by themselves: the vestibule, the semicircular canals, and the cochlea. The vestibule, it's this kind of this bony cavity right here surrounded by a bone. This is obviously not a bone, but you can see the bone surrounding it. And the vestibule has its main function has receptors for equilibrium and response to gravity changes. And so that's what the vestibule does. The semicircular canals, their main purpose, there's 3 of them, and they face 3 different directions. This vertical kind of laying on its side, or lateral, and then there's like a diagonal one here, and they can detect rotational movements of the head, and so this allows you to keep upright, to know which way is up, essentially, if you think about it that way. And then there's the cochlea, and the cochlea is the main hearing organ, and it's attached to the auditory nerve, which goes to the brain, and this is how you detect sound. Kind of looks like a snail. It's this spherical kind of structure. It contains an organ called the organ of Corti, and a membrane inside of it called the vestibular membrane, or the roof of it. And these organs work together, and we're going to talk about this in the next video. Work together to sense vibration and then conduct that vibration to the brain, so that our brain can then perceive it as particular sounds.